Welcome to a new episode of Outside the Panels with your host, Johnny the Machine Hughes.
Welcome everyone to an episode of Outside the Panels. I'm your host, Johnny the Machine Hughes, and you know me, I love a good Kickstarter. I also love a certain universal monster. So when you get a Kickstarter and a universal monster and you throw them all together, sounds like a perfect plan for fun and all sorts of craziness. Let's bring on writer, artist, creator, the dude that staples the book together when he sends out to the printer. It is Dave Swartz. Dave, how's it going?
Going really well, Johnny. How are you?
I'm all right, man. All right. I'm enjoying the semi-July sun that we get in the UK. This thing that we call summer, which is probably 2 hours of sun. But you know, other than that, all good, right? All good in the hood. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. Just dealing with this heat wave that we've been experiencing over here in the States. It's just 80 degrees like crazy every day.
So now you're just bragging. You know what I'm saying? You're just
Sorry.
bragging. Yeah. Heat wave, schmate wave. Well, I'm going to Ibiza in a couple of days, so I'm going to be sat there tanning like nobody's business. But enough of sunshine and sangria. You're here to talk about the book you've got a Kickstarter going on. It is called I've lost them. Where's my Confederate Monster? What is going on with this book, man?
Yeah, so Confederate Monster is Frankenstein meets the Civil War. So in this story, it basically takes place 8 years after the original Frankenstein story that we all know and love. So we kind of get a chance to catch up with these classic literary characters that we all are familiar with, and kind of understanding where they're at 8 years later in all of their lives, and setting it in a background that is a little unexplored and not necessarily as expected. So, you know, Confederate Monster to me is a really interesting, fun, new take on the Frankenstein story.
Cool. Well, you are well prepared, my friend, for on your Kickstarter, you have got a video trailer. So why don't we take a check out of the trailer as we speak? Here we go.
Good.
Yeah! Where's my wife? Do you hear me? Dismount and walk forward.
Darling, you're home.
And waiting for you with loving arms.
Must you maul her like an animal, Daniel?
Calm yourself, Mrs. Stevenson. I'm just getting into character.
They both insisted upon hiring Daniel's patients to cater. I too thought it would look as unseemly as it does.
Is that all you discovered while befriending Mrs. Schmidt, my dear?
Dr. Schmidt fits the description of our target in nearly every way.
Wow. Talk about an absolute great looking project. I tip my hat to that. I was like, where is this going? A couple of things. We need to get into this. What makes Frankenstein so viable? Because we've seen him in all sorts of things. We've seen him in Mignola's work. He's done his Unchained stuff. We have Universal Frankenstein. We have Frankenstein and Penny Dreadful, the TV show from a few years back. Of course, the Mary Shelley movie with Kenneth Branagh, the original book. I mean, the dude gets around.
Mm-hmm.
So why is that? What makes him so popular? And why makes him so useful in lots of different scenarios?
Well, I think that he's the original monster in many ways. In Dracula, all these other, the Wolfman. Yes, they are monstrous, but Frankenstein really looks like a monster, right?
Yeah, true.
In ways like that attracts a lot of interesting stories and a lot of interesting ways of approaching humanity and the idea of life and death. And I think we're all very fascinated with those topics. And, this character kind of, lives between both worlds. So there's some interesting perspectives to be gleaned from that experience. From my perspective, I wanted to try and create a new world in which to play in and kind of coincide the stories that are relevant to the Civil War alongside this classic tale. And when I did a lot of research and started, formulating a plan for the story, I found that there was a lot of really good synergy between the two. And I think it's sort of a match made in heaven. And I'm kind of surprised no one's tried to do it before.
It's interesting when you talk about Frankenstein's like the monster, the original, the OG, because Wolfman is a curse. Right? Dracula is a broken heart. Frankenstein is created to be a monster, and it's everybody else's reaction to him that makes the character interesting. He's quite a blank slate in some ways. He's very much a kind of, I'm a monster, this is my one goal, but that's how everything else affects him or how people want to use him. Is he going to be a force of good, a force of bad, or is he just going to be a force of something? So I find that really interesting when you kind of throw the Civil War in there with two absolutely diametrically opposed forces. How does a character like Frankenstein even come up with the sort of brain power to work out, well, you know what, this is the side of right and might, and this is the side of evil, or is he just along for the ride and see what happens?
I would say my monster in particular, he does have his wits about him when we first introduce him into the main story. So, there's an interesting backstory in this current issue 4, that I'm primarily focused on with this Kickstarter, where we get to explore how the monster became who he is now, 8 years later. So, I had a really fun time as a writer, being able to, explore what can be done, what has been done, and maybe inject a little bit of an update of how I would perceive, this story kind of playing out now. I've had many other, people ask me about, do I, change much about the reanimation process? Is it all just that, very classic lightning bolt that, brings the life back to the body? And I wanted to add more to that. I wanted to discuss a little bit more of, the science behind that. And that's also in the book. So again, I think that, like you were saying, there is a little bit of a blank slate here, not only with this character, but with this story, because Frankenstein has been featured in other stories, but not necessarily as a primary character. Maybe one of the only exceptions I can think of off the top of my head would be like by Frankenstein, where he was the main sort of character. But in my story, I wanted to also explore the other Frankenstein characters, and my main character I chose was Igor. Or in the story now, he's disguised as Dr. Daniel Schmidt, who's hiding as a reconstructive surgeon, basically creating these new fake limbs for soldiers who are coming back from war disfigured.
Okay, cool. So a lot going on then, just to say. It's not a hard jump to go from Frankenstein to the undead to zombies.
No,
that's quite a logical path.
Sure.
Were you concerned? I mean, fair enough, Frankenstein's been around years, he's been all sorts of stuff. Are you concerned that going zombies as well? Kind of, I mean, we've seen zombies for I suppose The Walking Dead is probably the most famous zombie stuff nowadays. But I remember 28 Days Later and all that stuff beforehand. So, yes, I'm that old. I said 28 days, not 28 years. I'm watching the comments. So it seems like a logical fit. Were you worried about how that might be perceived with the plethora of other zombie stuff that's out there? Or
I would say no.
Good. That's the right answer.
Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, the part of the story where the horde of undead, Confederate soldiers come into play, is really just the small section towards the end in the third act.
Cool.
So the majority of the story we're really just focused on the classic characters that we all are familiar with. So in that way, I don't think it's as much of a distraction as it might be if maybe they were featured more prominently throughout the entire book. But when I first started out, I was trying to conceptualize, what would be the motivating factor for the Confederacy as far as like how are they involved in the story, like what's their motivation as villains. And the thing that I came up with in researching it was it's a true fact that the Confederacy had a real problem with soldiers. They didn't have enough men to be able to fire all the weapons. They had plenty of weapons. They had all kinds of ammunition and weapons and stuff, but they didn't have enough soldiers. So that to me was just very inspiring. And I thought, well, what if they just had a horde of undead Frankenstein soldiers running around? So like you said, I think it's sort of a very easy, sort of segue.
Cool. Excellent. So I'm going to ask a question. If this is spoilers, I apologize. You can decline to answer it. It's fine.
Okay.
All right. When I look at the idea of Confederate monster, you're automatically going to think of Frankenstein, right? I'm assuming somewhere down the line, some normal, regular human people do some bad karma, and they themselves could be considered the monster. Because really, Frankenstein is not a monster. He's been created, and he's just doing what he's supposed to do.
Right.
I said this parable not so long ago on a different show about the frog and the scorpion. Have you heard of this one?
Absolutely.
So, like, the scorpion's not in that story. The scorpion's not a bad guy. He's just doing what a scorpion does, right?
Right. Just nature.
Exactly. So Frankenstein's not a bad. He's not bad. He's not evil. It's as we said. It's like the things that happen around him that shape him a little bit. So I'm assuming that there's some bad karma somewhere along the line.
Oh yeah. I mean.
Spoilers, be careful. We want people to buy the book, remember?
No, well, what I was about to say, and this is something that I have said in previous interviews, one of the other reasons why I chose the title that I did, Confederate Monster, is largely inspired by the idea that all of the characters in the story, even those that are portrayed to be, the protagonists or the good guys, they all have dark sides. They all have monstrous sides to who they either were or are. And that doesn't exclude the monster. Even though I portray my monster as a little bit more, I would say he's a little bit more in the middle as far as good and bad. Okay. He can do some pretty monstrous things. And, I think one of the things that I do show in the book is this concept of him sort of figuring out life all by himself, so he's just, and when he first begins, he's just driven by base instinct, like you were just saying with the scorpion, his nature. And with that, he's going around the forest, tearing deer apart and eating them with his bare hands, and so even though that's a pretty gruesome act, it's part of his nature.
Yeah,
his survival.
That's not an evil thing. It's just eating.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. There's no microwave back then. You can't can't stick it on for 2 minutes going, can you? So,
yeah. He's not cooking his food. No.
How do you like your dinner? Rare.
Right.
So before the show, I asked the question: what kind of role you took on the book, and you are pretty much the go-to. You are Mary Shelley for this project. As a writer artist, how difficult is it to have conversations with yourself? In that you are, maybe I should say that differently. So you come up. Tell me through your creative process. Do you write first and then your artistic side yells at you for saying, "How the hell am I supposed to draw this?" Or do you get like key images and think, "Well, this is a really cool image," and then your writer says, "Well, how the hell am I supposed to get there?" So
True. I mean, I would say it does have a good balance of both. Where when I first conceptualize of a story, I am an artist first and foremost. So largely, I conceptualize visually. So there are scenes that I see very clearly, and it's a matter, like you just said, of telling the writer side of my brain, this is where we need to get, right?
Yeah.
But
suck it up, buttercup, get typing.
You're right. So as a writer, I really enjoy being a writer, and really, diving into, the scenes and figuring out what's the best, way to push the story forward, allowing my characters to make natural decisions that, not only would make sense, but also, again, carry the story forward.
Cool.
So I do tend to find that I like that back and forth. Maybe I don't start necessarily drawing anything first. I do like to write and get a large portion of it written first before I touch any drawing. But for this book, I think I did start doing some conceptual designs as I was writing, because I was pretty confident in what I wanted to create as far as the look of each character based off of what I knew I wanted to do with them in this story. Because again, it's set 8 years later, so they can be a little different than expected.
So I suppose because this is the 4th issue along, you've had 3 issues already. A lot of that conceptualization's now kind of the background. It's kind of like, I know this, so this is your opportunity to get your writer side to really delve down and sort of like exercise that different muscle. It's interesting. You say artist first, and I've had a look at your website, and there's some crazy stuff on there. In a good way. In a good way. We'll show you it later. Don't you worry. Does that mean? I'm going to ask the question, and I'm going to be like, I'm going to sound like a dumbass. So apologies for this. Does that mean for you, art is more natural, and you have to work to be a writer? Or is it you've been doing both for so long now, it's starting to dovetail into just an organic creative process?
I mean, I would say at this point, since I've been doing it for so long, it is more of an organic process, and one really does influence the other. I work as a full-time comic book illustrator, so I do work for other books constantly. I'm usually working on 1 issue per month, or a new issue per month of whatever random project I may be able to get into my schedule that month. So when I'm doing my day job, oftentimes I'm reading through the script as a writer, not just as an artist, and I'm really trying to understand, okay, how do I tell the story that they're trying to tell in a visually interesting way, but then also, maybe I might have an opportunity to give some feedback to the writer and say, hey, maybe this could be tweaked a little bit so that it flows a little better. And every time I do that, the writers that I've worked with have always been very open to collaboration. And oftentimes it makes the whole experience better.
I suppose that's one of the beauties of comic books, is the fact that, you can, especially in your position, you can see things from both sides of the table.
Right.
Sort of like, okay, well, this is the image I've got. This is the kind of the page layout, panel layout I've got to work with. However, how do I get here? Well, if I did this first, hold on a second, that's on the script. Let's go and talk to the writer. Dude, have you thought about, I'll do that even. Have you thought about doing this to get to, and I suppose that's just part of the normal collab between writer and artist, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think everybody's relationships are a little different, and some artists really don't have any experience as a writer.
Yeah.
So I would imagine that some artists are just regurgitating exactly what they see in the script and doing it the way that they would do it. And like I said, for me, I really would like to elevate every project that I work on. And if I see an opportunity, I'm not going to keep my mouth shut. I want to, make it known. And frankly, like I said, I think not only does it make the project better, but it's going to make my working relationship with these writers going forward.
Cool. It's a good call. That is a good call. Right, we're going to take a break from one of our other shows. And when we come back, we're going to take a look at some of the pages. We'll have a look at the Kickstarter page. And we'll also have a look at your website as well. So a lot to pack into that second half. So without further ado, time for one of our shortest adverts. It's time for the Old Timers.
Do you want to find out what makes the professor do his happy dance? Check out the Old Timers Comic Book Show, only on the UCPN.
There you have it, the Old Timers Comic Book Show, where the hosts aren't old, but the comics most certainly are. The guys are taking a break for July. The new episode is out now. They're looking at the final issues of comic book runs. Yeah, go and check it out. They will be back towards the end of July. Look out for them around the 28th to 31st of July. There you go. Cool.
All right.
Public service announcement over. I have to promote that show. It's mine. Right. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at your Kickstarter. You've still got ways and ways and ways of days left. So you've the previous 3 issues got fully funded.
Yep. I did the first 3 issues over on Indiegogo a couple years ago. This project was really started back in 2020 during the lockdown. I was, like I said, I'm a full-time comic book artist for other people largely, but during COVID, it just wasn't happening. So I took the opportunity to do my own book for a change. And this is a concept that I had years and years ago. So I wanted to dive back into it, and I was only really able to get halfway through. I want to do issues 4, 5, and 6, and obviously we're on 4 now. But again, the first campaign went really well. It was very successful. I was so successful that I was actually able to do another issue 0, which is kind of like a prequel issue. So again, there's a lot of story already created for this book, and we only got 2 more issues to go after this one's done.
So with that in mind, because I'm in the UK. You are currently sitting at $1,232 for a $3,000 goal. That is pretty good going still. Yeah, that's it says 41%. I'd round up. That's nearly 50% of where you need to be. That's great with 23 days to go. Is there much of a difference using Kickstarter as opposed to Indiegogo?
It used to be. I think that's actually part of the reason why I went with Indiegogo in the first place. Because when I was researching both, I recognized that Indiegogo had some extra features at the time that Kickstarter just didn't have yet. But now, Kickstarter's caught up and is providing some extra things that Indiegogo had. Like the extended period after you've ended the campaign, you can kind of keep your campaign open a little longer for late pledges, including images with your reward tiers, because again, I'm an artist, I'm a visual learner. So I always want to add, images to things to just help the sale along a bit. I think now Kickstarter is a bit more caught up, and my network has sort of shifted. Back then I was primarily working with creators that were launching on Indiegogo, but now almost 3 years later, my network is all working on Kickstarter now. So I decided I wanted to follow that trend, and so far I think it's doing well. I would like maybe it to do a little better, but I think in ways, like I said, it's been a couple years since the first couple of books came out, so I in ways am almost kind of starting from scratch a little.
Yeah, that's a worry, isn't it? I mean, you to think there's so much comic product out there, Yes, I'm looking at you, Marvel. You don't have to say anything, it's fine. And DC, well, I say DC, it's all back from DC, isn't it? Then you kind of gotta, really work to get some rack space. And Kickstarters, I ask about the differences between Indiegogo and Kickstarter. I must do like umpteen of these shows, and very, very small percentage are on Indiegogo. The majority, like I'm talking 95%, are on Kickstarter.
Right.
So I was just curious why that would be the case. I have to say from the bat, I've had a look at some of the preview images you've sent, and of course the ones that are on this project. I think your art is absolutely brilliant. I love stylized art that is not too generic. I like things to look different. And you've got a lot of angles going on here, a lot of square jaws, a lot of straight lines, and you don't normally get that, and I'm really quite impressed. I like that. Good call, man. Is this the style you've worked to develop, or is this your natural pennage? If that's the word. It is now. I just said a new word. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I have always kind of had a bit more of an angular style. I take a lot of inspiration from artists like Ryan Ottley and Sean Gordon Murphy, Francis Manipul, Dan Mora. Dan Mora is really, I think, at the top of my list right now. He's just so prolific.
He's killing it. He's killing it at World's Finest. When you think he's coupled with Mark Waid, that if you're an old school comic book fan, that's the book you should be reading.
Yeah, it's so great. It's very, it's got a lot of, like you just said, that old school kind of feel to it. It's the colors are very, saturated and eye-popping, or eye-catching, I should say.
Well, I'll put it this way, I hate Batmite. I think he's absolutely useless. I've just recently bought the New Adventures of Batman on Blu-ray. My wife and I watched it, and I was like, you'll hate this. It's terrible. And it is. Batmite sucks. Yes, he does. And yet, under Mark Waid and Dan Mora, the latest issue of World's Finest, which you can see on the Definitive Crusade reviews, I felt sorry for the little lad. He was, he's only trying to help.
Yeah.
He wants to be a hero just like his hero.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. No, it's been great. My style is definitely a bit more of that, I would say traditional kind of approach in ways. I really wanted for this story in particular, for the color, for the application of my line, even actually the quality of the tools that I'm using. So I pretty much do everything digital now, and not just for speed, but for accuracy. And for this book in particular, I've adopted a pen that is got a very gritty kind of line to it. So if you look at the work, it almost looks like it is done by hand, because it has that sort of like pencil, almost like a rough kind of look to it. But again, it all flows well to tell the story visually, I think. And it's quite elevated from the first few iterations of the book when I first started almost 10 years ago.
I'm going to ask you a question about the creative process then.
Sure.
Yeah, just because you've said something, and I've had a bit of a light bulb moment. I'm not quite sure if I'm right on this. Back in the day, I used to get artists and inkers, or pencilers and inkers. Does that mean if a book doesn't have an inker, or an artist doesn't have an inker, it means that it's pretty much all done on digital?
I would say pretty much. Maybe not so black and white, but because I say that because I have noticed that a lot of artists ink their own work nowadays, like myself. Like Francis Manipul is a really good example of that. Sean Gordon Murphy is a great example of that. They largely just ink their own work, and frankly, from my perspective, obviously I do everything on this book. I love it. I just love being able to do every aspect myself. I know it sounds daunting to a lot of people, but it's just, to me, I feel like I have more creative flexibility to be able to change things on the fly. to make quick edits, especially when it comes to dialogue, because I tend to be obviously a little long-winded. So I tend to write a little long-winded dialogue. So it's a good opportunity for me to go in and edit things down, make it a little bit more streamlined. And again, make the whole process go by faster.
I think it helps when you've, as an artist, a writer artist, when you've got a definitive idea of what you want, that you're not diluting that idea by bringing third parties in. I think that's probably a good shout. Although you do, on the flip side of that, you do lose a new perspective on stuff, which can be better. So, you've got to take the rough with the smooth on that one, I think. Let's have a quick look at the Kickstarter pledges, because we all love a good pledge. Digital edition, $6. Massively important digital books. Are you a fan of, or are they a necessity?
I mean, I personally don't necessarily absorb my comics digitally, but I understand that in the world of Kickstarter and the internet, it's a good idea to offer for those who not only prefer the digital experience, but for those of you like yourself who are international, it's just a lot easier to get them hooked on a story.
Absolutely great point. I don't mind chipping in for a Kickstarter for a good idea and a story that grabs my attention. I don't mind dropping $6, $5. I do mind dropping another $25, getting it shipped over to me. So I'm with you on this. I prefer floppies. I still buy comics. I don't buy trades. So I prefer the comic in my hand. If I have to have digital because of the shipping, then I'll take digital. So it's cool.
And honestly, I think that might be just a sign of the change in generation. When I first started reading comics, I read the floppies, but there are a lot of new readers that are coming into the industry who may have had their first experience with comics online, purely digital. So for them, it's just what they connect with. So I'll be able to, meet that need for sure.
Cool. Standard cover costs $12. Cover B, $12. I like that cover. Is that listed down there on the big page? Let's have a look. Oh, there they are. Yeah. Different covers. Excellent. Oh, look at that. Oh, issue 0. Tales of the Crypt style.
Yeah.
Love it, man. Love me some EC comics. Absolutely tickety boo. Catch up for $25. You get all the issues so far. Well done. Like that one. Oh, we're getting some stickers. Now we're talking.
Yeah.
Everyone loves the stickers. Don't ask me why. But I like they're good. I like stickers. It's good. Stick them on comic book boxes. Where we at? $35 for that. You've got your digital catch up for $40. Physical catch up for $40. Oh, that's a good price.
Yeah, I put a couple sales up for the catch up tiers because when I first launched it, I think I wasn't anticipating some of the conversion rate changes, especially for the international people. So for me, I got some feedback from my wonderful collaborators in Australia. And they said, this digital catch-up is really expensive for us Australians. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to go in there. I'll drop some sales. That way we can really, attract more of the new readers because I think this book really needs some new readers.
That's good. $70 gets you a Confederate physical catch-up, all 4 issues, plus a prequel issue. Excellent. It also includes the PDF version as well, so you can keep them safe. Your digital library there. Nice.
Yeah, so like I said, I do books for other creators as my day job. So I have a couple of issue 1s from some series that I worked on. Vampire Detective in Space, which is a great book by Caleb Palmquist. And then I have an issue 1 of another horror book called Bloodsmith, which is done by Morgan Quaid. That's a really interesting book as well. So again, you can get issue 1s of those, as well as a collected edition of my other story, Feast or Famine, which is a sci-fi story, which is like Tesla and Einstein in an alternate dimension partner together and go on a space adventure. So it was a fun book. It's all completed, so that collected edition there is all 3 issues. It's like 100+ pages with some extra content at the end.
Cool.
So yeah, it's really cool.
So you've got things in there for every type of fan. You've got digital, you've got physical, you've got extra stuff, bonus stuff. It's like, you're spoiling everybody, man. You don't need to be,
Hey, I try to be good to my customers.
You do indeed. If you're interested in the Kickstarter, there is the link. Yes, I know it's a long link. Nothing I do. It's Kickstarter. Just go to kickstarter.com and type in Confederate Monster issue 4, and it'll take you straight there.
That's right.
It's not hard to do. You all know how to use a Google search bar, right? Other search bar engines are available. Just saying. We're not sponsored by anyone. Right, you have a website as well. Let's have a look at that. Give me 2 seconds. Bring that up. That's it. Right. Before I show you the website, you might want to check your Twilight Zone color schemes, just in case I put on some shades. You know what I'm saying?
A little colorful.
Yeah. So if you got your shades on and you're sitting comfortably, whoa, what's going on here? I like that third eye idea. That's class. Like that.
Yeah, I'm so one thing I haven't really discussed is I'm very much inspired by alternate theories of life and reality and science and spirituality. So I really have spent a lot of time researching and developing a pretty good knowledge base of this esoteric approach to reality. So, a lot of my stories are injected with that. Confederate Monster really isn't an exception. There are some things within the story that I throw in there that are derived from, just weird theories of how we came to be on this planet. So yeah, and then I am also an abstract painter. I do other types of creative projects and work. And I just, honestly, I love playing with color. So that's part of the reason why I wanted to really inject my website with a lot of bright, vibrant color.
Well, it certainly makes it stand out for sure.
Right.
It's like a lemon and lime popsicle all wrapped together. Yeah.
That's right.
Lemon and lime's cool.
Yeah.
There you go. Loads of stuff on this website you can go and check out. Do commissions as well, right?
Oh yeah. I'm always open for commissions. Even there's a tier on the Kickstarter right now where you can get a mini commission along with a copy of issue 4. And I have everything in add-ons. So if for those of you who are not familiar with how Kickstarter works, you don't necessarily have to just pick one tier. You could select just the book, and then once you get into the checkout page, there'll be a whole scroll of add-ons where you can just sort of build your own package. So if you want to just get issue 1, you can go in there and select just issue 1, or if you want the sticker and the magnet or whatever the heck you want, you can do it in the add-ons after you hit that pledge button.
Cool. Well said. So the Kickstarter is live as we speak. At time of recording, you've got 23 days left to go. Plenty of time to hit that target. I will show the link again. There it is. If you're interested in the book, and you should be, because it looks great. Great idea, great premise. Go check it out. There you go. Simple as. If you want to keep up to date with what's going on with Dave and all his work, there are several different aspects you can get through social media. You've got your Facebook, you've got your Insta, and you've got your Twitter. Yes, I said Twitter. It's never going to be X to me. I'm sorry about that. So whatevs. Again, I'm not sponsored by anyone, so I can say what I like. And check out the website for loads of cool stuff on there: merch, images, commissions, all the sort of stuff that you'd be interested in. Yeah, there you go. Dave, it's been an absolute blast. That's flown by.
Yeah, it's been a great
yeah. I always ask this of my guests as they get ready to leave the room. If I gave you 60 seconds, a 60 seconds elevator pitch on why people should be pledging for the Confederate Monster.
I don't even know if I need 60 seconds. Honestly, one of the first things
That's what she said.
Yeah, the first thing that I say to people when they ask me about the book is I say, Cowboy Frankenstein set in the Civil War. That in and of itself is usually enough to pique a few, eyebrows. But, the book itself, to me, is so interesting because it's a really fresh take on the Frankenstein literary universe, if you want to call it that. There have been some other iterations of Frankenstein, but really it isn't a character that is as prolific as, say, like a Dracula, right? Yeah. Or even Wolfman, to be honest. So, for me, I wanted to just create something that was totally fresh, totally interesting and new, to bring this character into a new sphere of interest for audiences. Cool. And as you saw in the trailer, I approach things very cinematically. So I would love to be able to explore this as a TV series or a movie one day. It would be just absolutely fantastic. Dream come true for me.
There you go. 1 minute taken. Well done. Dave, it's been an absolute blast having you on the show. Thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule. You've got your own work and you've got your Kickstarter going on, so thank you so much. And I have to say a big shout out to Dave as well. We were scheduled to do this last week. Something came up and we had to postpone, so thank you for your patience in that as well. I do appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on your show, Johnny. It was really great time.
You're more than welcome. That's it for another show. Don't forget to check out the UCPN for all your favorite shows. You've got the Old Timers, you've got the Definitive Crusade ready for more DC action. No prizes on a sabbatical, but it'll be back soon. So just keep it UCPN for all your favorite shows. What more can I say? I've been your host, Johnny the Machine Hughes. And as always, it's that time. Adios.
Visit undercovercapes.com for the latest and greatest podcasts via the Undercover Capes Podcast Network. Also visit our parent company website, comiccrusaders.shop, all about comic pop culture.